The NFL draft has officially ended. NFL offseason is in full effect, which means Miles and I are back. We're going to talk some draft recap, favorite fantasy outcomes from the NFL draft, pretty much anything surrounding the rookies as people get ready for rookie drafts and dynasty, just rookies for redraft purposes, all that stuff. NFL offseason is undefeated. One of my favorite parts of the year. Miles, how's it going? Welcome in.
It's going well, dude. It's like the most exciting time of the year. We got NBA playoffs. We got draft. We just came off of free agency. I mean, like you said, we got drafts around the corner. This is NFL, like, what are we, preheating? Is that what we're doing? We're getting ready to bake a little bit, but we're early. We're early.
I'll tell you what, I have my first Dynasty rookie draft on Tuesday. So this pod is coming at a perfect time. We're recording on Sunday, May 5th. So, yeah, I'm fired up. I've been working the phones all day trying to move some players. I was cutting some guys, making rooms for the rookies. We're all the way here. Best time of the year for fans like you and I, too, because this is when I convinced myself the Falcons have a legitimate chance at the Super Bowl, before it becoming very apparent that they don't every season. And you as a Jags guy, you're in the same boat. You're in the same boat. But yeah, you had a better draft experience than I did. Well, obviously, we're going to start with the biggest storylines. First one being my Atlanta Falcons taking Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr., 8th overall. Yeah, I'm pretty over it at this point. It's just the decision-making process I don't think was there at all. I don't really think the Falcons had a plan, but again, not Michael Penix's fault that he's going to a potentially incompetent front office. I'll start with the argument that they said they're following the Green Bay model. Just different than the Green Bay model in so many different assets. You have, first of all, that Kirk has never played a snap for the Atlanta Falcons versus Aaron Rodgers, who already has rapport with all the guys in the locker room. So that's problem number one. Two, they got Jordan Love 26 overall. We used the top 10 pick on him after paying Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed. And three, the age obviously is big. Jordan Love, I believe, was 21. Penix will be 24 shortly. Again, I used to be way more in the age matters camp, but for QBs, I mean, if you're good, you're playing 10 to 15 years. So I don't think the age is as big of a deal, but obviously a shocker at the top of the draft. It's gonna take probably an NFC Championship appearance this season for Terry Fontenot to keep his job, in my opinion. I don't understand why he's planning 4 years down the line when I think his job is seriously on the line. Fortunately, I think Raheem Morris will be around for a while regardless, but I don't know if Terry Fontenot will be the guy moving forward next season.
Dude, okay, couple things. One, like, this is your team, this is your raw emotion. Like, just give me like the play-by-play. I know I was texting you, but what's going through your head when they say the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm looking on Twitter because now you can just figure out the picks an hour in advance. Falcons are taking Michael Penix Jr. I couldn't believe it, but like, from you, just walk me through what's going through your head.
Dude, so I had to work the draft. I was leaving for New York City the next morning. I'm watching with my roommates in the living room. So I'm also on Twitter, but they don't want me to react because like they're watching the draft live. But I had to be on Twitter for work. So I see Michael Penix come across my screen. I immediately get a text from Povinelli about, the text just says, "You won't believe this pick." And I just respond, "It's Penix." He just responds, "Yup," back. And then I just had to sit there and act like I didn't know they were drafting Michael Penix. And as soon as they announced it, I started letting the F-bombs fly. But again, I want to reiterate, nothing against Michael Penix. Again, he's not my favorite prospect in this draft. And if he was not an Atlanta Falcon, I would not feel like he was going to be a really good pro. But I have since convinced myself that he's going to be really legit. But regardless, I was very upset emotionally. That took a lot out of me, kind of ruined the draft. But I told my roommates, I think it was, I cashed a nice sized wager on JJ McCarthy over 5.5. And I think
Same.
this was the price I had to pay to do that. So that's
Dude,
basically all the emotions I went through.
Here's what I'll say, because like listen, I largely agree with you. I think, and I listened to your other pod and I just listened to your take on it. And I'm like, I agree. It's the process that you have to question. It's like, I mean, you don't have to rehash it, but it's, if you're going to sign Kirk Cousins, you're probably not drafting a quarterback for the future. You need to draft a piece that's going to help you win now. You know, if that's a defensive lineman, whatever. But I do want to push.
It feels like you just did two things that are very counterintuitive.
Yeah. You're
and by one working out, you're automatically like minimizing the effect of the other decision. It just that's the main thing that I'll say.
Right. And no, I mean, I agree with you. And like, that is where I stand. I'm like, listen, from a process standpoint, it's a terrible pick. On the other hand, though, I do agree, though, if Penix hits and Penix is awesome, nobody's going to care that Kirk Cousins has a $100 million contract, right? Because you would have found your franchise guy. I think when you talk about what Kirk Cousins is going to be for the Falcons, he's going to be a pocket passer, relatively immobile, and they're going to build the offense that way. And I do think in a league where you see a lot of quarterbacks who are moving and running, what was Penix draft kind of description and what he was going to be in the league? He's a precision deep ball thrower, great pocket passer. When you make him move, he's not as great. And you could also question the fact, like, why would you draft a quarterback like that in a league that's moving away from that type of style? But I do think it helps when you have a quarterback like Kirk who's going to come in with an injury history recently, and then you have a guy who could step in and play pretty immediately. So you kind of almost safeguard against the fact of what you did last year with Ritter, what you had with Mariota, what you had with Heineke. Like, you are out of the quarterback depths of hell. And I do think that's what the Falcons are drafting for. And although I don't agree with it, there is a world where it all works out. I think I told you before, I'm like, say Will Levis is really, really bad this year. The Titans have pieces. If Penix looks okay and he starts playing, do you just ship Cousins? And again, I'm not a contract expert, but do you just ship Cousins out of there and send him to a different team, recoup that value, and then it's like, okay, it all worked out? There's a scenario where that happens, but I'm largely with you. I think the pick was just shocking, and it just shows bad process. So
I feel like if you trade Cousins, the Falcons will most definitely be eating most of that cap, which, again, I think best case scenario is we get like a Russell Wilson, Matt Flynn situation where like Penix just wins the job, and it's like would be pretty shocking if Kirk didn't play or Kirk's like not ready or something. But you put so much pressure on Cousins because if he gets hurt, even if it's for like a game, he might never come back in. And like I don't know if you're the Falcons and Penix comes in for 2-3 games and like plays really well, you can't. He's basically in there. Like you can't put Kirk back in.
Yeah, you're not pulling him unless he does poorly, but you have the option, and then in 2 years you have a way that the roster can go. So like I get it. I mean, it's not a great pick. With the people who are on the board, you could have got a more impactful player for this season and next season. But the other side that I'll give you this, one more thought, like just food for thought. If every other team behind them valued Penix that way, like because from the reports, Penix wasn't going past 12 or 13. Like if the Broncos had the chance, I don't know if they'd take Knicks over him. I don't think he's slipping past the Raiders. I think it's like been pretty well reported. The Raiders like were going to take him and thought he was going to be there. The other side to it too, Powers, is like you can't as a GM just be like, I expect this quarterback to be there at 8 in the draft. You don't control your own destiny. And now that he's there, it's like, well, we're going to capitalize and we're going to take it. But
I think you knew Penix was there at 8. I think they knew Penix would be there at 8.
That's fair.
The thing that also confused me, this is the last thing I'll say on it, and then we can move to the other quarterbacks. But like I don't understand why you don't tell Kirk ahead of time. Maybe it's because you thought teams would trade in front of you for him, but like this came out of like left field. They didn't even bring him on for a top 30 visit. Like
right.
So
it was a wild process.
It was a shocking pick. The other thing, I feel like maybe that means Kirk's not as far along as it's been led on to believe, but at the same time, he's like throwing on the field already. So like, I assume he's going to be ready. I don't know. It will make for a very interesting offseason. Training camp will obviously be like an actual big deal this year. So whatever, we're along for the ride. I don't know how much longer Terry Fontenot will be there, but so be it. In terms of the actual fit, if Penix did get on the field, great offensive line. What I believed, pretty great weapons. So I like the fit a lot. I think Zach Robinson's going to do a great job play calling. I have a lot of confidence in him coming over from the Rams. I'm excited to have a coordinator that like actually doesn't just run dives and screen passes. So that'll be fun. But obviously, top of the draft, cream of the crop, Caleb Williams goes number 1 overall. We've known this for more or less for about 2 months. I don't know. I feel like there was never a serious debate that he wasn't going to go number 1 overall.
No, dude. If you have a guy like, the Andrew Lucks, the Trevor Lawrence, the guys who have been talked about since like their sophomore season of this guy is the generational prospect. He was going 1. There's nothing really more to say. He's walking into a great situation. I think his situation's better than any. Like just compare Bryce Young last year to this team with the Bears, and it's night and day. Like the dude's gonna go in and walk into a fully loaded offense. We'll see about the coordinator in Waldron, but I think he's gonna be pretty good.
This is the perfect situation for him and the Bears. I mean, the only reason it doesn't work out is because he's not good. You have everything you need to succeed there. Waldron did a really good job with Geno in Seattle, so I'm confident in him. Matt Nagy seems to who is it? Not Matt Nagy, Matt Eberflus. Eberflus, yeah, he's got like a new do and stuff. He seems to be swagging out. You bring in Keenan Allen. I thought Roma Dunze was a home run pick.
Yeah, that's such a good pick.
And we'll obviously talk about that more when we get to the Bears themselves. But yeah, I think Caleb Williams could. I know it's unrealistic to expect CJ Stroud numbers, but I think he could do something similar to that. I think he'll throw enough times, and yeah. The one thing it'll be interesting to see how he does in the cold weather. I don't know if he's ever really played in like snow and stuff, and he's like a California kid, so we'll see. That'll be interesting.
It'll be interesting. It will be interesting. I think that he's just like, nobody's ever questioned his arm strength. You know what I mean? Like nobody's been like, oh, can he make the throws in like, a windy environment? We'll see.
I feel like it's more like the ball security and not like, I feel like it took Josh Allen even sometimes like with the wind, they like underestimate how much they like mess up those deep balls. So we'll see. Jaden Daniels goes 2nd overall. This one, we really didn't know until like day of, but it was between him and Drake May. It also sounded like they might have preferred McCarthy over Drake May, although I don't know how much to believe about any of the McCarthy stuff anymore. But overall, I think a decent situation. Obviously, a very attractive fantasy prospect because he is going to be the premier running quarterback in this draft class. Mm-hmm. I think he could push 1,000 yards rushing, similar to how Lamar's done. So he definitely gives you a great floor because you're going to get all those rushing yards that you might not get with some of the other guys. I did want to say about Caleb, I think he's going to have some sneaky rushing upside.
Yeah, for sure.
Had a bunch of rushing touchdowns in college, but yeah, Jane Daniels comes in. He has Terry McLaurin. I love that for Terry McLaurin. First of all, he's going to finally have a guy that I think is going to get him those deep balls. And Jahan Dotson, not a bad number 2. Other than that, Commanders don't have a whole bunch that I'm really excited about, but I don't mind the situation.
No, I don't either. The only thing that I think I would throw out there is I kind of look at him as like a more polished passer from what Anthony Richardson was last year. And if you remember last year, I was high. I'm like, Richardson's floor as a fantasy quarterback is just so much higher than everybody else just because he's going to run the ball. So by the same logic, I should like Jaden Daniels. I'm probably a little bit cooler on him, but I do think that as a fantasy option, when you're talking about like, especially backup quarterbacks, because I think that's something this season I'll probably focus in more on. Like, I kind of want to make sure my backup quarterback has some pretty decent upside. I think he's got that. I don't love the situation. He's got a couple good receiving options. Austin Eckler's there in the backfield, which is honestly a pretty good back to have for like a rookie quarterback.
I honestly forgot they signed him.
Yeah, it's crazy, right, dude? You have a great receiving back out of the backfield that he can just dump off whenever he needs to. Good blocker. So I like it. I think there's some other quarterbacks in this class that I'd probably prefer over him in this year's like upcoming drafts. But
yeah. Speaking of which, Drake May goes to the Pats at number 3. Feel bad for him, man. He is walking into an absolute horrible situation. They pick up Jalen Polk in the second round, and then Javon Baker, I believe, in the 4th. So, and they have Kendrick Bourne, who will probably be their number 1. Juju's still on the roster. Hunter Henry might see like 15 targets a game. So that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I also more and more I hear and read, it feels like he's probably not going to see the field until, post bye week or even later than that, which from a team building perspective, I understand, but obviously reduces his redraft fantasy relevance. Doesn't really affect the dynasty, in my opinion, but what do you think about Drake May? What's your opinion of the fit, all that?
I mean, credit to him because he didn't go in like he went in all his press conference. He was like so happy to be there, which is just like funny to me because you're walking into a situation with little to no weapons, right? You're talking about a couple of rookies who are probably going to provide most of your offensive upside on the outside. I love Javon Baker. I think he's going to be a pretty good player, but how much can you expect out of him as a rookie, right? Like you mentioned, Polk is there. I just think his upside is so capped, and the redraft purposes, you can't even really talk about him this year. Dynasty, he's obviously a first-round pick. You stash him and see what can happen, but I don't love it, and it's more just because of their infrastructure. Like I think their team is going to be pretty. I think they're going to struggle to win games this year, and I think they're going to struggle putting up points, and that just makes me think Drake May doesn't have a lot of upside. It's also weird though too. What about them drafting Joe Milton? Like what is
kind of like I could see Joe Milton turning into a pretty decent pro. I mean, I don't know.
What are they doing in camp? They're like, hey, Joe and Drake, like, rookies here, just go at it. Just
because of the situation, I think Drake May is going to have to be such a special quarterback to actually pan out, and it's unfortunate. But he feels like he has the most bust potential outside of maybe Bo Nix. But like, you're not expecting the same thing out of Bo Nix, in my opinion. I'm not expecting the same thing out of Bo Nix as you are Drake May, who's going 9 slots higher, obviously.
Right.
So he's got an uphill battle. Penix goes at 8. We don't have to talk a lot more about him. He realistically won't see the field at all this season outside of an injury.
No. There's not much fantasy relevance for him, but I will say that we'll get to this with the Falcons.
If Kirk goes down though, he's a starter in most leagues.
I think he's the guy that on the waiver wire like you go all out for if you need a quarterback, right? I think if that happens, he's poised to come in and have a fantasy relevant season, but there's too much risk at the beginning of the season to draft him. So,
yep. Vikings apparently get their guy. JJ McCarthy. Everyone's saying it's the best fantasy situation besides Caleb Williams mostly because of Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, and then obviously people like Kevin O'Connell.
Dude, they picked up Aaron Jones too, which is their offense is going to be great. I think he's a good play caller, but again, fantasy relevance. This is just me. I don't see JJ McCarthy as this high point fantasy quarterback option.
He feels like the highest floor quarterback outside of maybe Caleb, but I don't know what his ceiling is.
Yeah, I don't think he'll be. I don't know though. there's so many unknowns, and it's expected. All these quarterbacks are pretty raw. But we're betting on the weapons. Like, I think Justin Jefferson's going to be good, whether it's Sam Darnold throwing him the ball or whether it's J.J. McCarthy or whether they go back and get Josh Dobbs again. Like, he's just that good. So I think it's kind of hard to separate that from, okay, is J.J. McCarthy going to be relevant? I think he can sneaky run, though. Like, he's sneaky got some wheels on him. Maybe that's part of their offense with, like, a better athlete at quarterback than what they got from Kirk. So,
yeah. I mean, that offense saw QBs put up some big numbers last year with Dobbs.
Yeah.
I think he finished with like 15, even that game when he threw 4 picks.
Yeah.
He threw for like 400 plus yards. So I don't even know. Oh, they got Aaron Jones, right? I was going to say, I don't know who they got in the backfield. We'll see if they lean on the run a little more. I don't think Madison had a rushing touchdown last year. I'm like pretty sure he didn't, which is just
that's crazy.
insane.
I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
He got drafted like he was going to be like, you know, he was going to be an RB1 type of guy. People drafted him like that.
Yeah, he's on both of my dynasty teams. Yeah, he had 180 attempts, 180 attempts and 0 touchdowns. You got to
That's horrible.
Hang up
That's
the
horrible.
cleats, brother. Hang them up. Moving on, the last QB to go in the first round. First time ever we saw 6 taken in the top 12 picks. Bo Nix goes to the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton makes a big scene, says that he tricked the Vikings into trading up. The report comes out that he loved what Bo Nix had in his backpack on the official.
The lacrosse ball.
We talked about Drake May's situation in New England. There is a less than 1% chance Bo Nix succeeds in this Broncos offense. It is horrible. They trade away Jerry Jeudy. You got a decent backfield with Javonte Williams and P. Ryan, and then they drafted a rookie running back as well. But Cortland Sutton's your number one. Tim Patrick comes back, I guess. You have Marvin Mims. Nothing really to like about the situation at all, in my opinion. I didn't even like the prospect I didn't like the prospect to begin with, and he goes to arguably the worst situation out of any of the 6. So
yeah, I mean, look, my only comment, like, I don't think there's any fantasy relevance. There's minimal fantasy relevance across the entire roster, let alone at the quarterback position. Sean Payton can say whatever he wants. What happened was Russell Wilson and him they never got along. He never liked the fit, and he screwed the team. Like, I really, truly believe what he just did by saying, whatever, we're going to take on all this dead money from his deal. You just hampered your team. The whole reason they couldn't trade up is because they have no assets. They have nothing to give. Like, they can't further.
You probably have to. You probably have to take Nix here because you don't have a second-round pick. And right. I guess they're probably also worried the Raiders might take him, but, like, brother, it's Bo Nix. It's Bo Nix.
It's also, he's the 6th guy to go. And, like, I think I was telling you, it's just like, you're using a top 15 pick on the 6th best rated quarterback by the NFL teams at that position. Like, that's just tough for me to fathom. Like, you didn't want to go get anybody else on the board. So, I mean, like, I think, like, look at the Raiders, and we'll get there, but, like, I think the Raiders made out because it's like, I didn't take the quarterback that's got this low ceiling. I got Brock Bowers, who might potentially be one of the 3 best tight ends in football in 3 years. I don't know, you know?
Yeah. I also just, like, there's the whole thing, like, you never know when there's going to be a QB class this good again. It's like, I guarantee you this time next year, we're going to be talking about Carson Beck and Junior Sanders like they're going to be, like, franchise saviors, dude.
Yeah.
Quinn Ewers, like, every year, it's like, you know, whatever. But, yeah, those are the quarterbacks. Other big storyline in the first round, obviously, first defensive player doesn't go till 15th when we see Latu go to Indianapolis.
I actually really
why do you think defensive players fell? Do you think that means it was a weaker defensive class? We obviously know there wasn't any dominant edges this year, but just curious what your opinion is on defensive players falling.
So here, I think what you said is largely right. My opinion is this. I think the best defensive players in this draft were the cornerbacks. Like, I think people really liked Quinyon and Terrion Arnold. I think the cornerbacks were the better position. But that's not really becoming, like, it's weird. There's, like, a shift in what gets drafted. Offensive tackles, receivers, quarterbacks, edges.
Yeah.
And defensive tackle, if you're elite, right? Because like those positions get paid the most. It's like there's a direct correlation. I think it was just the edges were so weak, it pushed everybody down. And I think next year when you see like less quarterbacks that are going to be ranked as highly, it's going to flip to like offensive tackles, edges at the top. And we're going to see them pop back up the list. So I don't think it's necessarily a trend. I just think that this class didn't have the particular guy that was, a slam dunk, can't miss prospect. So I don't know. What do you? Because the Falcons were rumored to be taking Dallas Turner like the entire offseason. And they said, absolutely not. Screw that. We're not taking that guy. We're taking a quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I obviously wish they would have traded back and taken like Mitchell at like 15 or something. But yeah, I mean, they fucked up a lot of things post that. I think every team kind of just went into a full blown like, what the hell just happened?
Right.
They were probably largely responsible for Bo Nix being a first round pick.
Yeah.
So yeah. Going out to defensive players, Eagles obviously made out like bandits again, according to most experts. They get Quinyon Mitchell at like 23 or 24, and then follow that up with Cooper DeJean in the second round. Curious if you think DeJean will be a corner or what you see his role being in Philly.
I think he's going to be, how like the Lions use Brian Branch a little bit. They kind of like just put him in the backfield, but he can kind of play a little bit of nickel. I think that's going to be DeJean. He's going to like just move around the formation. They're going to kind of just use him as this like defensive chess piece almost of like, all right, if you're going to play, if you're going to play a lot of receivers and try to spread us out, well, we have a good tackling, athletic guy to cover. I think he's going to cover tight ends pretty well too. I think he can also play corner. Like, I think the thing is, like, we just don't look at him and, it's this white cornerback comes in the league, but this guy's a freak athlete. He's insane. Yep. So I think he's going to move around. And, I mean, I don't know what you think, but, like, this kind of leads into, like, I think the Eagles have one of the best drafts in the NFC. I think getting him and Quinyon Mitchell on the same team and not having to move up to get either of them, what is the league doing? We just keep letting the Eagles get exactly what they need and get the best players at that position each year. It's phenomenal drafting.
Yeah, so someone joked in one of my group chats that they just take the best available player according to like every mock draft out there, and it honestly wouldn't surprise me. But it does feel like every year they get guys that everybody loves. My favorite draft personally in the NFC was the Chicago Bears. Obviously, pretty easy to say when you have 2 top 10 picks, but obviously you get your franchise quarterback, you follow that up with a potential true number 1 wide receiver. And honestly, from there, I don't even think it really matters what you draft. But yeah, they follow that up with they get a left tackle, they get a running back, tight end. No one that's really gonna blow your socks off. But I think just what they did at the top of the draft set them apart. And then the other draft I really, really, really liked was the Arizona Cardinals. Monty Awesomeforth, I think, is the name of the GM there now. Obviously, they had a ton of assets from that trade last year with the Texans, but Marvin Harrison, I think, is going to be a dog. He could potentially be a top 5 receiver off the rip. I think that's my hot take. We can talk about that more when we get to the Cardinals. You also get Trey Benson, who I'll talk about a lot later. I love what they did there. And you get another receiver. You get Elijah Jones out of BC. We'd love to see that at corner. I thought they had a great draft. And if I was looking at their roster, they're a little thin. They're still thin at receiver, but they got some. They're getting some players there. They're rebuilding pretty fast. I think they're going to be competitive this season.
Dude, you stole my thunder. I was gonna say I really like the Cardinals draft, and like we're trying to keep it to drafts that are going to impact fantasy. Obviously, I love what the Bucks did, but I think it was just more holistic on their roster. Like they just put they got Bucky Irving, the Oregon running back. Adds depth behind Rashad White. They bolstered their offensive line, and they got Jalen McMillan. Like I think they just got a couple pieces across their offense. It's going to give Baker some more options. I don't think any of them are going to change fantasy landscapes, but guys to note that you could put on your roster in a dynasty league. John White doesn't pan out, maybe there's a space for Bucky Irving or something. So, but I love the Cardinals draft. I don't know how. I mean, I think we're both going to talk about Trey Benson. He's probably one of my favorite dynasty drafting prospects, I think, this year in this upcoming cycle.
Yeah, I want all the shares of Trey Benson this year. Worst drafts, sadly, Falcons, no brainer right there. Don't have to talk about that anymore. And then I'll stay in the division. Carolina Panthers. I mean, bad teams stay bad for a reason. You trade up a spot to get Xavier Legette, who we'll talk about more, has a lot of potential red flags. And then you take Jonathan Brooks, who I like. I love it for fantasy taking Jonathan Brooks in the second round. But in terms of what you need on that roster right now, running back did not feel like the spot to invest. So I get it. You're trying to surround Bryce with as many weapons as possible, but I just don't think it was a very good draft overall. So those are my two least favorites in the NFC.
I'm actually just going to, because I would say the Falcons, but you took that one. So I'll add one more in there. I think the Cowboys, from a fantasy perspective, had a very bad draft because you have CeeDee Lamb. You brought back Zeke, which I don't really get. It's just Jerry's affinity for Zeke. It's weird. I give them credit for getting another tackle, although he's developmental, but I don't see where they got better from an explosive offensive standpoint. You had chances they were rumored to take Jonathan Brooks the entire draft process. That would have been a prospect I'd be really excited about. Behind the Cowboys line and how they develop offensive linemen, getting a guy who was really dynamic before the injury, I'd love that. You walk away with no more running backs and you're kind of just in this limbo. And you have this weird thing going on with Dak where I'm not sure he's going to be the quarterback after this year. So I
almost feels like they're setting him up to fail, dude. They just want him to fail so they can be like, Dak's not the guy.
It kind of seems like they're just they're not stocking the kitchen and they're saying, hey, make me a steak dinner. And they're giving him, choice.
They're giving him some lamb. They're giving him some lamb,
So I don't know. I didn't like their draft at all. But
CeeDee Lamb's probably going to be wide receiver 1 this year, though, because he's going to have 200 targets.
Or they're going to break him in half because he's going to get hit every
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what they're doing at running back, but whatever. All right. We're going to go team by team now from the NFC. We'll start in the South. Falcons, we'll be quick on them. Penix, really the only guy that has any fantasy relevance this year. Like I said before we got on air, they did draft Casey Washington out of Illinois, who's a receiver who I guess if he was able to break into the lineup, they should be explosive enough to get him some points, but not someone that I would recommend drafting, really. Carolina Panthers, like I said, I hated their draft, but they're intriguing from a fantasy perspective. So Xavier Legette, they spend the 32nd overall pick on out of South Carolina. Super explosive player. Everybody knows that, but obviously didn't have basically any production his first 3 years. Explodes for 1,100 yards last year. Great in the return game. Not a very polished route runner, but just an athlete. So from a fantasy perspective, I like him a little bit because I think they might force feed him touches like Debo gets touches in San Francisco, but not someone that I'm particularly high on.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Panthers is just I don't believe in their operation. I don't think they're going to be a good competitive team. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So, Xavier Legette probably he deserves some shares in some leagues. There's nobody that in a redraft league, though, I'm targeting. I mean, I just talked about Jonathan Brooks. I really like him with the Cowboys. I don't really love him with the Panthers. Jatavion Sanders, a tight end out of Texas, I also really like him. I just need to see more from Bryce Young, and I'm not willing to roll the dice on that or point my flag there. So I'm kind of with you from a fantasy perspective. There's really just nothing on their offensive side of the ball that gets me excited. I do like the signing of Deontay Johnson. That might
I think he could sneaky be a very productive fantasy player this year.
And I think he could open things up for a guy like Xavier Legette. That's like the only kind of path that I see him having like immediate fantasy relevance. But long term, I love picking up Xavier Legette in Dynasty. I think he's a for sure second round pick. You know, he's got too much talent and raw physical talent not to be, but I don't see a lot from this team.
Yeah. Moving on to the Saints. They really didn't do anything from a fantasy perspective. Spencer Rattler might be worth some shares in Dynasty, and if Derek Carr really sucks. But outside of that, they did draft a receiver named Bub Means. I don't know much about Bub, but I like his name.
Nothing about Bub.
Yeah.
I like his name, but there's no fantasy implications with the Saints.
Yeah. I do think if Rattler somehow gets starts for them, I think he could be a viable streaming option, but yeah, nothing really there. Moving on to the Bucks. They
Low-key,
also
look. Let me throw this at you with the Bucks, right? I think who was there? They had a guard or a center last year, and I'm blanking. Who retired like right before the season? Kind of.
Ali Marpet.
Yeah, it was Marpet. He left, and then they got that guy from Duke, Graham Barton, he was a tackle in college, but I think his NFL projection is more like interior offensive line.
He's projected to start at center for them right now.
Right. So I think that you have, another interior piece. I'm just curious if that helps their run game, because I don't know if their other draft picks are going to make a real big impact. But I do think, sometimes you get that pick of an offensive line that can kind of bolster what you already have. And if you can run between the tackles, maybe that gives Rachaad White a little bit more value. But I don't know. What do you think?
I like adding Jalen McMillan in Dynasty. I just don't think that this offense is explosive enough to produce 3 fantasy relevant receivers this season. Right. And I don't see McMillan getting more targets than Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. Aside from that, I think Bucky Irving could have some sneaky value, but Rachaad White did kind of turn into a workhorse back last year. We'll see if that continues. He's pretty young. So yeah, not a whole lot to be excited about from the Bucks either. Moving on to the NFC East, the Eagles, they add Will Shipley and Johnny Wilson, as well as Ainias Smith, receiver out of A&M. I am taking some flyers on Ainias Smith. If he can get in that slot, I think he could be productive for them. And then Johnny Wilson, I think, is basically just going to be a red zone touchdown threat. So not very high on him. Will Shipley realistically shouldn't see the field much with Saquon.
No, but he is kind of like a pretty interesting gadget guy. And just with Saquon's injury history, I know he was healthy last year, but that could be interesting. But I don't think he's getting drafted anywhere. So I think he's more of a pickup type of guy to keep your eye on. From the receiver perspective, I actually kind of like Ainias Smith, but you have Devontae and you have AJ Brown. I just don't see, and you have Dallas Goedert. So I just think the target share for anybody coming in there is just going to be so low. Like, you're just not going to be used enough to be fantasy relevant. So I don't think they did anything of note on the offensive side of the ball.
Move on to the Cowboys. They pick up a guy out of Southeast Missouri State named Ryan Flournoy. I guess he could potentially see some targets. I don't know much about him, but they didn't do anything rookie-wise that's fantasy relevant. So going to skip through them really quick. The Giants, obviously, have a big one. They take Malik Neighbors 6th overall. Curious where you're stacking him in terms of the class, and then just receivers overall. I'm very high on him. I think he's going to be a true number 1 out the rip. Potential top 15 wideout in fantasy this season for me.
Wow. Okay, I'm definitely not there with you on that one. I'm torn because I think Neighbors, if you just put on the tape, the dude's the most electric player in this class. The guy just separates. He can get open in so many different ways. I really like him. But then you have to weigh it against the fact that what do you think of the Giants from an offensive standpoint? I think they were bad last year, and I don't think they did much to get better besides drafting him. So how much can you really use this guy when everybody on the field knows like he's the only way that your offense is going to hurt me? I just don't know how to draft him. Seriously, I really think like where does he go in a draft where you're getting good value? I don't know. I have no idea.
See, I would rather take him than like Devontae Smith.
Really?
Yeah, like those number 2 guys. Like I would like Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith. I would take Neighbors over both of them. So I think it's a very realistic possibility that Darren Waller retires before the season.
Smoking?
And listen, dude, just based off of straight target share, I think Malik Neighbors is going to be more productive than Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle. And I will stake my flag on that. I think he will be a legit wide receiver.
I want this clipped. I want this clipped.
I don't care how bad Daniel Jones and Drew Lock are. He is going to see 150 targets this year. Maybe not. 150 might be a lot. I'm trying to see how much
150 is a lot of targets. I don't know what the Giants' offense is going to be. Like, they're going to be down. I don't think they're going to be good. They might be going to a new quarterback next year. I think that's what makes me so uncertain about him. Like, are you taking Malik Neighbors in the 3rd or 4th round this year in a redraft league?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it for sure. Okay, CeeDee Lamb led the league with 180 targets. All right, 150 was ambitious, but I think realistically he could see like Calvin Ridley saw 130. Calvin Ridley saw 136 targets last year. I think that is very within the realm of possibilities for Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the targets. I'm really just questioning.
Hey, remember the last time we saw a rookie wide receiver dominate in New York? Odell Beckham Jr. I mean,
yeah, dude. I mean, I don't question his talent. I mean, okay, but flip it to the dynasty side on him. I think that he can't make it past like the top 3 picks. Because long term, I think this guy, he will be a star. Once I figure out the quarterback with him, he will be a stud. Like, I just don't know if Daniel Jones is going to be that for him immediately.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback past this year. So,
I think Drew Lock we might see some Drew Lock action this year. We'll see.
I think there's a real chance Drew Lock plays some serious minutes.
The Commanders, very, very, very interesting team from a rookie perspective for fantasy. Jaden Daniels, obviously we talked about, goes 2nd overall. They pick up Luke McCaffrey in the 3rd round, who's currently slotted to start at the slot for them. And then a guy that tested really well, a lot of people has been exploding up just draft boards, and he had a huge rise in the big board, was Ben Sinnott, the tight end out of Kansas State. Like all of them, honestly. I don't think Zach Ertz will be the starting tight end the whole year, and if he is, I don't think he plays all 17 games. We've seen athletic tight ends that have not produced in college routinely do well in the pros, i.e. George Kittle, some other guys, Jimmy Graham, etc. And then I love Luke McCaffrey. I think he just made the transition from quarterback, balled out for a Rice team who honestly I think played like 3 or 4 QBs this year. So Luke McCaffrey is a big target for me in Dynasty in the later rounds. And then I love Jaden. I think Jaden Daniels can be a starting quarterback in redraft leagues right away. If you're going the route of not taking a QB till late, I think he's a very viable option.
He's a prime. Dude, what you said is perfect. If you want to go late QB strategy and you just want to go high upside like boomer bust, I think he's the type of guy, because I do think I think Anthony Richardson this year in drafts is going to go a lot higher than he did last year, and it's just a rookie label. You could maybe get that same effect with Jaden Daniels and get him later. So, although I don't love him, I won't be doing this. I will not be waiting to take him until the later rounds. I still think he's got some fantasy relevance. I like Ben Sinnott too, but because they needed a tight end. They needed somebody long term. Because Ertz probably has a couple of years left. They needed some long-term security. I like him, but not guys I'm targeting in the first 6 rounds of the draft.
Yeah. All right, moving to the NFC North. Lions, we're going to skip over. Shout out them for drafting BC legend Christian Mahogany, but they did not take any skill position at offense. The Bears, Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. Caleb, I think he's going to probably be a top 10 QB taken in redraft leagues this year. I'm biased. He's going to be my number 1 overall pick in my dynasty draft on Tuesday. So I'm excited to have him. Rome Odunze, I think, obviously has way more appeal in dynasty. I don't know if he'll be productive enough to warrant a high draft pick and redraft this year. Just a lot of weapons there and probably not quite enough targets. But I could see him potentially coming on late in the season and being like a true difference maker in the playoffs. So I still think he's worth a pick depending on where you take him.
I think my path, because we all know Caleb, I'm with you. Caleb should be drafted like a top 10 quarterback in fantasy and redraft, and he should be the number 1 pick off everybody's board in dynasty. I think that Odunze obviously is a first-round dynasty pick. I think his path in a redraft league is Keenan Allen gets hurt. Because Keenan Allen has started to miss some time. Keenan Allen is going to be like almost a safety blanket for Caleb Williams. But I also think they can run 3 wide receiver sets where they can put Odunze, DJ Moore, and Keenan Allen on the field. I think the long-term rapport between Williams and Odunze is going to be pretty special. I think it might accelerate if Keenan Allen gets hurt and he has to find another place to go with the ball. So that's the only way that I see him being relevant for this year's like fantasy season. But long term, I mean, I love it. I think he's going to be a stud. I really do. I think he's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to be looking forward to watching some Bears games this year. Packers, they draft Marshawn Lloyd. Really not a path to success unless Josh Jacobs gets hurt. And as we know, he gets like every carry. So nothing too exciting there. If Jacobs goes down, should be use all your fab budget, number 1 waiver claim, all that on Marshawn Lloyd. I think he could be good given the opportunity. Moving on to the Vikings, obviously the big one, JJ McCarthy. I still don't know how to evaluate him. I think he's going to start from day 1, but like they do have Darnold there. His upside is a top 10 QB right off the rip, but I think it's more likely he's in that 15 to 20 range if he starts from the jump.
I think he's like a serviceable like spot start if you need him, but I don't think his best fantasy options aren't coming this year. That's a long-term play. So in dynasty, I actually do think he's probably worth an early 2nd round pick. Because he's playing with Justin Jefferson, but I don't think there's a path for him in redraft, at least in like the next season and a half, where you're really going to love it. So I don't think they really did anything that moves the needle for me.
Here's a question. In dynasty, are you drafting him over Drake May?
Yeah, 100%. Me personally, yes. And it's all situational. Like, do I think the Patriots are going to find a way to be offensively relevant? No. I know the Minnesota Vikings have weapons already, and that's what fantasy's about. So I would rather risk it on JJ McCarthy, but I'm still not taking him in the 1st round of a dynasty draft. I think there's too many other receiving and tight end options that you can get value for over him.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, to the NFC West, Arizona Cardinals. They take Marvin Harrison Jr. 4th overall. They take Trey Benson in the 3rd round. Running back out of Florida State. Marvin Harrison, I think you could justify taking him in the 2nd round of redraft this year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. I think he's a star waiting to happen. Dude, so think about this. The Falcons picked up Rondale Moore. They had Marquise Hollywood Brown last year. So you're losing a ton of targets just from those 2 guys in the offense. Kyler is going to be there the full season, and like I guarantee you, this is going to be his favorite weapon on the field. And I think he's a major upgrade from, besides the CJ Stroud year, I think he's a major upgrade from anything that he had at Ohio State. So I think that it's the obvious thing, though. Everybody's going to know it because of his name. But he's a guy that I think should fly up some draft boards for redraft this year.
Listen, 2020, DeAndre Hopkins put up 115 receptions on 160 targets for 1,400 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think that is honestly within the realm of possibilities for Marvin Harrison in year 1.
Yeah, 100%. I did. Okay, but here's the only thing that I think maybe hinders him in the slightest. I really like Trey McBride, and I think at the end of the season you saw him coming on. And from a target share perspective, that's the only person I think can threaten him, but it's a tight end. So I'm with you. I think he's going to walk in. I think he's got a clearer path to 130, 140 targets than Malik Neighbors does. That's just me.
I think they both do.
I can't get you to move off of it. Huh?
Trey Benson, absolutely love this spot. James Conner about to be 29. Hasn't played a full season in Arizona, I think, since he got there. So there will be a path to some games for Trey Benson. He is a major target for me in Dynasty, as I think he'll be the starter as soon as next season. And I think he is a worthwhile late round draft pick and redraft this year. Like I said, I think there's a very good possibility he's playing 5-6 meaningful games for you.
Dude, I was gonna say before we got on, and you kind of stole it because you like him so much. He was gonna be my favorite pick for the Cardinals because I think it's easy to say Marvin Harrison Jr. is like, the guy. Everybody knows him. Trey Benson is sneaky, like perfect for this offense. James Conner and him are about the same size, but from a physical, like just athletic standpoint, I think James Conner ran like over a 4.6. He runs like a 4.39. You instantly just get a speed improvement from the backfield from them. And he's just as big. He's 6'1", like 230. So is James Conner. Couple pounds here or there, but with the injury history noting from James Conner, I think that this guy is just like lightning in a bottle waiting to happen. He's a guy you got to circle. I think you have to put something. If you're getting a rookie running back, I don't love Jonathan Brooks. I think he's easily the next guy on my list. He was the consensus mock draft, like number 2 running back. I think his path to being a star is pretty clear in that offense.
I think he has some sneaky receiving upside too. I just don't think they used him much in college. Obviously, they had Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman there. So I'm intrigued by him for sure. Moving to the Rams, curious what you think about Blake Corum. They used a 3rd-round pick on him. Kyron Williams, we saw, was a big-time league winner last year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think Blake Corum could do the same thing if Kyron goes down. I don't know if they're going to split them more. I'm really not sure what the plan is with Blake Corum, but you do use a 3rd-round pick on him. Makes me feel like they're going to use him to some degree.
I think they had to bolster their backfield because they had to get rid of Cam Akers last year, So I think you need another guy that you feel pretty confident in just taking snaps and taking reps. So I like him. But with how good Kyron Williams is, I don't know if he's the guy that I'm taking the risk on at the end of the draft because Kyron Williams is a league winner type of guy. I think the Rams knew that when they got rid of Cam Akers, that this guy had that much talent. So I think it's pretty clear he's RB1 and Blake Corum will slide in as RB2. So I like it. I don't think there's not major implications for this fantasy season because of it.
Yeah, that was an interesting pick to me. I don't know why they took him, but good for him. 49ers. They also surprised in the 1st round, taking Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. And obviously there's rumors that Brandon Ayuk or Debo will get traded. It's starting to seem like they both might not get traded. So curious what your projection is for Ricky Pearsall in year 1.
I think he's a pure dynasty guy. I think he's a back of the 2nd round, maybe top of the 3rd round type of pick. I don't think there's any reason to really draft him in redraft. He's going to be a pickup guy. If Debo gets banged up and goes down, or Ayuk goes down, or somebody's unhappy and sits, and there's like a holdout or whatever, that's a path for him to have some relevance. But it's more long term because I do think after this is probably the last season, if they do it, the 49ers play both Ayuk and Debo. And then after that, I think one of them is going to be gone. I think the more interesting conversation about the 49ers, like not from like the fantasy perspective, is just like the receiver position. Nobody wanted to give up a pick and pay Ayuk. And I think you're going to start seeing this shift of, well, if you're like a high-end 2 fringe 1 guy, there isn't a market for you because there's so many receivers in the draft. And we're more excited about the Malik Neighbors and the Rome Odunze, that level of player coming into the league than we are about paying an already established 5-year guy. So nothing from a fantasy perspective. I just think it's interesting what they're doing with their team management and roster management.
Deep sleeper, I'll tell you, I liked Jacob Cowing at Arizona. He's small, obviously 5'8", 168, but I liked his game in college. So if he somehow got on the field, I'd be interested. Last but not least, our last team in the NFC, Seattle. They don't take any skill position players, so we don't really have to touch on them. But I think Jackson Smith and Jigba might take that leap this year. That's my one projection for Seattle.
I think he's also the guy I feel like he's gonna kind of get forgotten about because of the way he got used last year. And I think I think that's a mistake. I think the guy's got a lot of talent, and he might just show it this year. So I'm with you on that one.
And Tyler Lockett's got to stop being productive at some point, but it hasn't been yet. All right. Finally, for the NFC, our last part of this episode, favorite rookie landing spots. We'll start with QB. Mine's Caleb Williams. I think it's pretty obvious. I don't have to say much about it. I don't know if you have a different QB you want to highlight, but that was
it would be Caleb Williams. I'll just say if it wasn't, as much as I don't know about JJ McCarthy, where he landed is like probably the best place for him to see if he's going to be great. So I do like the spot. I just have questions about the prospect.
That's fair. All right. For running back, receiver, tight end, I chose 2 Arizona Cardinals. I went with Trey Benson and Marvin Harrison.
I would go with, and one is a short term, one is, I guess both of them are a little bit long term. I would have gone with Trey Benson as well. I would go with Rome Odunze. There's something about what I think he can be with the Bears long term that is going to be pretty special. If he doesn't show it this year, which I'm holding out hope that he's going to come on the field and prove something this year. So those are my 2 guys that I'm kind of planting my flag on.
For sleeper, I'll go with Luke McCaffrey.
You really like Luke McCaffrey. It's not Luke McCaffrey. I guess it's not as much of a sleeper, but I go Pearsall, and I go Pearsall in terms of maybe long-term sleeper, but I think the guy's got a lot of talent. He can separate pretty well, and I think in Shanahan's offense, he's going to find a way to use a guy who has a skill set like that, So I like him more of a long-term sleeper, but he's probably my only guy.
All right, that's the NFC. We'll be back for the AFC preview, and then as we get closer to the season, we'll start breaking down the whole field. That's the best time of the year and then it turns out week 2, the guy you thought he was is not
that guy. Yeah. He's not that guy.
All right, we'll see you soon for the AFC.